All right, let's get right into it. We're all in this massive race to adopt AI, right? But there's this hidden risk, a huge one, that a lot of companies are just completely overlooking. And it could totally undermine your entire data strategy. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that risk and, more importantly, talk about the solution that can turn your data into a massive competitive advantage. I mean, just think about that for a second. It's a pretty unsettling question, but it's one we absolutely have to ask. Because when you ask your AI assistant for some key business insight, you expect the truth, right? But what if that super sophisticated, professional-looking answer it gives back is actually based on a total misunderstanding of your data? And look, this isn't some far-off hypothetical. For a lot of companies, this is happening every single day. And if you think I'm being dramatic, well, the numbers don't lie. Recent studies show that even the best text-to-SQL models, the engines that translate our simple questions into database code, they only have an execution accuracy of about 73%. So let's be real. That means almost 1 out of every 4 queries could be flat out wrong, giving you flawed data that looks perfectly right. And this leads us to a new and honestly much more dangerous problem. We all know the old saying, garbage in, garbage out. Well, with AI, it's garbage in, gospel out. These models can spit out incredibly confident but completely made up answers because they just don't have the business context. They don't just fail, they fail with this incredible, misleading conviction. So, this whole phenomenon, it actually has a name. AI hallucination. And it's not just some technical glitch for the IT department to worry about. No, it's a full-blown business crisis. When your AI confidently makes stuff up to fill the gaps in its own understanding, the fallout can be really, really severe. And let's be clear, this isn't just about a few inconvenient errors. When you act on these flawed AI queries, you end up making terrible strategic decisions. For marketing teams, it means you're throwing your budget away based on bad data. For finance, you could be looking at serious compliance risks, like with SOX or GDPR. But maybe the worst part of all, it just completely destroys your company's trust in its own data. Okay, so that's the scary part. How do we stop the hallucinations? How do we build that trust back into our AI tools? Well, that brings us to the solution. It's something that acts like a guardrail for your AI. Let's dig into what we call the semantic solution. The answer is something called a semantic layer. The easiest way to think about it is like a universal translator or maybe a shared brain for your whole organization. It's this critical bridge that sits right between your messy technical databases and your actual business users. It makes sure that when anyone or any AI talks about revenue, everybody agrees on what that word actually means. And this slide right here shows you exactly what that translation looks like in practice. It's night and day. On the left, you've got a simple everyday business term, monthly recurring revenue. And on the right, that's the messy, complex SQL code you need to actually calculate it correctly. A semantic layer maps these two together, forever, getting rid of any and all confusion. Now, I want to be clear, this solution isn't some kind of magic, and it's not just a piece of software you install and forget about. It's a really deliberate process. It's about building a layer of trust and governance right into the core of your data infrastructure. Let's take a look at how that actually gets done. And this really shows that it all starts with people. Building this trust layer is a deeply collaborative thing. It's an ongoing process. You have data architects sitting down with business leaders in interviews, in workshops to really understand and write down the rules of the business. It's all about creating a shared language for what the data really represents. So here's how that process usually breaks down. First, the data teams interview stakeholders to capture all that business logic. Second, they map those business terms, words like churn, to the right tables and columns in the database. Third, they standardize the really complex calculations for metrics like customer lifetime value. And finally, and this is the most important part,
They use a tool to enforce these definitions on every single query automatically, which guarantees consistency.
And this is exactly where platforms like Querio come into the picture. They're built specifically to enforce these rules. So let's see how they do it. They give you a centralized governance layer, so your metrics are always the same. They have built-in validation that checks queries for errors before they even run, which is how you stop hallucinations. And with serious enterprise-grade security, like a direct read-only connection and SOC 2 compliance, it becomes a system you can actually rely on. Okay, so we've covered the tech. Let's make this really concrete. How does all this create a real competitive advantage, especially for someone like a marketing leader who's on the front lines making data-driven decisions every day? For years, for way too long, marketing has been stuck with these generic dashboards. You know the drill. The data's often stale, pulled from last night's data dump. A simple question turns into a huge analyst bottleneck that takes days, sometimes weeks to get an answer. And the worst part? The metrics are all over the place. The definition of revenue on the sales dashboard is totally different from the one in finance. It's a mess.
But the semantic layer completely changes the game. It unlocks this whole new way of working, conversational analytics with governance. Now, marketing leaders can just ask questions of live data in plain English and get answers right away. It's true self-service. Revenue finally becomes a single source of truth. And this creates incredible agility, letting your teams respond to campaign performance or market shifts, like right now.
And the impact on accuracy is it's staggering. Gartner is predicting that by 2027, companies that get this right will boost their Gen AI model accuracy by up to 80%. Just look at the jump on this chart. You're not just getting answers faster, you're getting answers you can actually, truly trust. So what happens if you do nothing? What's the real cost if you just ignore this hallucination crisis and stick with the way things are, with ungoverned data?
Well, the cost is immense. Research shows that organizations can spend, on average, 31% of their total project effort just on fixing data quality problems. Think about that. That's nearly a third of your team's time and energy just cleaning up messes that could have been prevented in the first place. And for marketers, this is where the rubber really hits the road. Wasted spend isn't just about a few bad ad campaigns. It's about systematically misallocating your entire budget, because the fundamental data your AI is using for recommendations is flawed and totally misunderstood. And the stakes here go way beyond just being efficient. As this quote reminds us, data governance isn't just a nice to have, it's a critical piece of managing corporate risk. Inaccurate reporting can lead to regulatory failures, huge fines, and a whole lot worse. So at the end of the day, this is the question you have to ask yourself and you have to ask your team. Without governance, without a semantic layer, your data is a huge potential liability just waiting to mislead you. But with it, you can unlock its real potential, turning it into your single most valuable asset for driving smart, data-driven growth. The choice is yours.